Welcome to What CEOs Talk About. Do you wonder what CEOs talk about behind closed doors? How they bring their vision to reality? How do they overcome and succeed through adversity? We share that and so much more with each episode. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hello, everybody. My name is Martin Hunter. I am the host of What CEOs Talk About, where we translate strategy into frontline operations. Today, we've got the class clown, the comedian, Ryan Shortill. If we want to use the proper Irish accent to pronounce his last name. So there is no H in it, a Shortill, right? So, and then the R, like most Irish people don't pronounce it. He is the founder of Positive Adventures, 16 years in the making, correct? He is also the president of the EO San Diego chapter for the past 7 years. So EO stands for Entrepreneur Organization, for those who don't know that. And he is a Renaissance reader. He's in the pre-show. Ryan told me how he reads books. Damn, the skill of multitasking does not exist, but your ability to switch from one book to another like you do is absolutely crazy. So I can't wait to dive down deeper. So thank you, Ryan, for being on the show.
Yep. Thanks for being here. My parole officer said I had to sit in, so I had to do some sort of community service. You know, I figured I'd help internationally speak and try to get a little maple syrup out of the deal.
Here we go. Ryan, what is the title of the show for today?
Well, I believe we could probably call it The Spirit of Business, and looking at kind of the more metaphysical approaches to how you choose to run your business. There a long time ago, they would say the whole purpose of business is to derive profit. But I think that a lot of people recognize that you can actually get profit by focusing on a different kind of spirit. For example, that payroll company that offered a living wage of $70,000 or more. He was, shouted down as a socialist and that it would hurt his business. But basically, it TEDx'd his company or whatever it may be. It got him a lot of great publicity. And basically, he was just operating from a place of spirit there, which was counterintuitive to what a lot of business books would say. But at the end of the day, the new economy, the future that we're moving into doesn't look like the business of the past. And
Correct.
People are really looking for more purpose, freedom, autonomy. And if they have the difference between two companies and one pays even more, they're going to choose the one that has a greater social component. And
Correct.
That's demonstrated in study after study that ultimately people are willing to pay more or get paid less in order to be a part of something that is shifting and transitioning where humanity could, in fact, arrive and will with the likes of you and me, sir.
The spirit of business. So true. I mean, when you look at the age of piracy in the 1770s and stuff, we have a business of transferring goods from, taking slaves from Africa, moving them to the Caribbean, and then picking up stuff. And, piracy came about. And there is a good show on Netflix. I think it's The Republic of the Piracy or something like that, where actual people followed a value and a code more than business. So to your point, go on Netflix and I think it's called the Republic of Piracy or anything like that. So anyways, cool. So Ryan, tell us your story. So way back in when Ryan was a little lad from Irish descent family.
Let me just throw a little Renaissance talk in there. The song Amazing Grace was written by a slave trader who was taking a ship full of humans across the ocean. And he was overwhelmed by this feeling of grace and shame and everything and wrote that song. You could probably look that up. It's out there. So I'll take you way back as a storyteller. I was sitting with my Uncle John when I was 12 years old in the gun room. I'm from New Hampshire, from a town founded in 1623. They live up in a farm in Maine. And my Uncle John was sipping scotch, and he said, "I'm going to tell you the story of our family." And I said, "All right, I'm all ears." And he said, "A long time ago, 3 brothers left Ireland. They were on the way to New England. And one brother decided to go to Canada, and one brother decided to go into Boston, and one brother fell in love with a Protestant girl, and the other 2 brothers wouldn't let him get off the ship. And it's true story. This is all true. The only story was that he had to go to Australia. So my family line has been traced by 3 great aunts to the Shortills in northern, eastern Canada, the ones in New England, and then there's a group of us that went to Australia, all based on these 3. Now follow me on this. So the one that shows up into Boston says there's too many Irish there, so he goes up to Portland. He doesn't know what to do, so he goes to a church. And he sits there and he prays and he tries to figure out what he's going to do. He sees this woman. He falls in love. He can't believe it. He goes back down to Boston. He gets some work. He makes just enough money for a train ride back up, goes all the way back up there, and she's not there. So for 9 months, as my uncle sips his scotch, as I wrangle my hands wondering as a 12-year-old boy up in the farmhouse gun room surrounded by old hunting rifles. And so he goes back for 9 months. And then he decides, I'm only going to go one more time. I've spent my entire year investing in seeing the love of my life. And he goes back up there on the final time. And all of his friends think he's crazy. And there she is. And he says to this woman, I can't believe you're here. And he says to the man that she's with, her father, he says, my name's Joseph Shortill. I want to marry your daughter. And he said, you're nothing but an Irish immigrant. You get out of here. You know, we've been gone. We only come here for whatever vacation. And so my great-great-great-grandfather, whatever it may be, he goes back down to Boston. He goes back up again. And then this whole week, he's so busy and he's just enamored by this love for the woman. And so then he goes back to the church and he says, my name is Mr. Shortill. I'm asking your daughter's hand in marriage. And he says, I told you once already, immigrant, you'll never do it. And he said, well, let me present to you this hope chest. And he presented to her the most exquisite craftsman designed hope chest, woodworking. I come from a long line of craftsmen. And the gentleman looks at it and he studies it. And he says to him, I've never seen finer wood worked by human hands. And I know if you're that quality, then my daughter will always be well taken care of. And I say to my Uncle John, whatever happened to the hope chest? And he goes like this, it's the one you've been playing in ever since you were a little kid. You used to pull out all the blankets and you and your sister would play in and out of that chest. That's the reason why all of us are here today. So that's where I came from, bro. Let me hear about your family history.
Mine is Scottish, so there's murder and sheep involved in it.
Oh, goodness. But yeah, I came from the great state of New Hampshire. Live free or die is our state motto. I've lived that way. The short story is I drove with my mother and brother to take them out to California when I was 13, crossing the United States, opened my eyes. As a Sagittarius and fellow traveler of my lineage, I basically discovered that there was a whole world out there. So when I was 16, I followed some rock and roll bands around the country between summer of junior and senior year. Shortly thereafter, I went to Europe and traveled all over Europe. And then eventually, after being a school teacher and making it to, 50 countries on 6 continents, I ended up in San Diego, had a job. The job kind of dried up. And then the only time in my life I was on unemployment, I used those unemployment checks and I started a business out of a garage, which now does multiple millions of dollars deploying service projects all across America, doing corporate team development, staff training, outdoor education, and rites of passage with kids, really trying to focus on the spirit of what it means to be human and what it means to have a business that I can use as a delivery for that spirit.
Done. Bosscast is done. There you go. Full circle. Done. What, 12 minutes. There you go, folks. That you've got Ryan's vision on the spirit of business and where it derives from. So if you open the chest, there is spirit. That is such a wonderful story, Ryan. Thank you very much. I'm a firm believer in storytelling because we translate values, we translate history, we translate forward projections of how to act today and tomorrow through those lovely stories. Now, is it embellished? Yes. Do we talk about all the characters and all that good stuff? It doesn't matter. The matter is how does it relate? How do you make it beautiful enough, just as looking as a flower, to saying, wow, that is impressive and that is worth mentioning. So thank you for this lovely story. Now, let's break apart your title, Spirit. What do you mean when we say spirit? What are you referring to?
Well, they did all these studies back in the day. When a person died, they would weigh them beforehand and after to see if there was a weight change.
7 grams?
Yeah, we all talk about, what is it? In religions, they might talk about the Holy Spirit,
Mhm.
but basically the spirit can be multifaceted and multidimensional. It can be the spirit of what your mother and father taught you and your family values. It could be in the metaphysical sense, and depending on your religion, the incarnate, your recreation of your life over and over, having a human experience, attempting to discover and release past traumas as well as carry your ancestral gifts forward. It could just be your nature.
Mhm.
Everybody knows that friendly person that whenever they walk in, you feel calmer, you feel more grounded, more centered. Maybe it was your grandmother. Maybe you're thinking of that person right now in your home. Spirit is all encompassing, but what I like to think of it as is kind of the internal reflection of what motivates you, what you see, and for those who have done some deep reflection and opportunity to discover more facets of their being beyond the Kraft macaroni and cheese and parking tickets and the bills
Mhm.
that we have to pay. I believe there's so much more to our existence than is oftentimes let on.
And how history. So I grew up poor. And I'm going to say poor because it's not poor because I don't think we could afford the R at the end of poor. So, yet there's always food on the table. There was, now, don't get me wrong, my dad was alcoholic, which I think he's like 40 years sober, but still back then, and having said that, created who the person I am about being resourceful, about being witty, about being able to tell stories and bullshit my way around certain, events that I had created. Now I look at my kids and you go, okay, how do I apply that? If yet I want to give everything that I can to my kids. And my wife and I have come to an agreement that they go to public school. They get an allowance for work that they do. If they don't work, they don't get it. Even though I have more money than I can spare with them, we choose not to and ensure that they understand the values of wanting and needing and being kind to other people. So that, I think that's, when you talk about spirit, then you can apply that same principle to businesses, right? You can say, what is it that we're offering more than just widgets? Widgets is a result, or service is a result of what you want to do, right? So give me some, how did that spirit of business come about for you in your life? When did you realize, you go, oh, yeah, that's kind of what I'm doing, how I'm doing it? How did it come about? Tell us another beautiful story, Ryan.
Sure. Well, first and foremost, similar. I grew up with not a lot of resources. I'm the youngest of five kids. My mom was hospitalized and dealt with Great Depression. My father was a Vietnam veteran and had to work to basically put food on the table the whole time. We lived in a depressed economy in upper New Hampshire. I lived just a road or two off of dirt roads. Now, of course, it's way more spendy and gentrified, but back then, no one could find work ever.
Mm-hmm.
What I learned, though, was that when you needed something, you reached out into your community.
Mm-hmm.
Nowadays, people just go to a Walmart, or worse yet, they just go and order something on Amazon. I've never personally gone online and ordered anything from Amazon. Sure, I've had an assistant order me a book or whatnot, but I tend to go out into my community. I take my skateboard down to the post office. And so when I was growing up and you had a flat tire, you didn't just go down to the shop to buy the tire. I would go around and shovel driveways and say, hey, I see you got this old bike in the garage. Can I just take out the tire? It doesn't look like the bike's ever going to run again. And so I learned that people who grew up without a lot of resources, when they need to do a brake job, they find their cousin or their uncle or their next door neighbor, and they come over and they help you do that brake job. And in that, they'll do one brake, but then they watch you do the second brake to make sure that you actually aren't using them, but rather learning from them, so that once you know how to do a brake and someone else asks you, hey, do you know how to do a brake job? You do the same thing. And so there was this transition of power that was always happening without necessarily an interchange. And
Mm-hmm.
that interchange is really capitalism. And without it, it's more communal based. And so what I learned from not having a lot of money, like I had to put myself through college. One of the there's a few things that we can say about parents. One of the greatest gifts our parents can give us is teaching us how not to live. Because if you've got a mom who's always high strung and high anxiety and late for church, or you tell yourself, like, I'm not going to be late to things, and I don't want to be high strung. But then similarly, they can teach you the qualities and characteristics that do make up their spirit. And both of my parents were deeply involved in service. My father is lieutenant colonel in the Army. My mother was an Army nurse. She was also a regular nurse, and she worked in mental health and human services. And that, I think, is what helped guide me. Now, my first girlfriend, I asked her out on a date, and she said, "You can only go out on a date with me if you come down to the soup kitchen with me." And I was like, "Soup kitchen? I can pony up for a couple of hot dogs." She said, "No, I volunteer at the soup kitchen, and I'm 15, 16, trying to get together with Charlotte, and I'm down there serving homeless people to be like, okay, when do we get to make out, And something happened there. Something happened. I saw the kindness in the look of people's eyes. I saw the familiarity of people who didn't have a lot. And they saw me as someone taking time out of my day to be with them. And that really did trigger something, which basically shifted and altered my entire life moving forward. And I even wrote her 25 years later a really nice letter about that, because I really dedicated my whole life to the spirit of service and giving back, because we are not descendants of selfish people. We're descendants of people that moved in bands. Correct. And lived in packed caves and took turns for security and hunting and looked out for one another. And I believe in that quality. We're actually hardwired. Many people don't know this, but we're hardwired to be altruistic.
Correct.
When they show little toddlers and something drops, they automatically know to help, even if they've never been taught to help or whatnot. And same with monkeys. They do the same. If a monkey gets all of the bananas and another's sitting there going, "This sucks," he walks over and gives them a banana. The spirit of our community is often beaten out of us, because when we are afraid and when we are divided, we're more easily manipulated. And that's where it starts to get into some heavier topics. But ultimately, when somebody lends out a helping hand, we're all results of people helping us. You had a coach, you had a mentor, you had a teacher, you had an aunt, you had an uncle that was there when no one else was. And in that simple interchange, money was not often exchanged. It was my boss who took me to my first yoga class and said, "You're a 19-year-old young buck. If you don't take care of your health, you won't be able to support a family. So you need to look out for your nutrition. You need to look out for your body and its performance, and then you'll be able to be successful in life." He wasn't saying, read all these books and figure out how to get all these properties. He was telling me how to meditate, how to drink green juice. And again, that goes back to the spirit. He wasn't making me an employee. He was being a maker of a man. And in that gift, I've been able to share those same techniques. Rady Children's Hospitals. It's the largest children's hospital in the second largest city in the 8th largest economy in the world, San Diego. I had them do all 5,500 employees went through a curriculum that I built that was all based on what my first boss taught me. I taught them yoga, myofascial massage, green juice smoothies, the power of journaling, meditation, and how to do a service project. And it was all because my boss showed me that that's the way that felt most right. And he had lived a life of self-reflection, and it resonated with me. And then I built a business to reflect that kind of truth and beauty. And unfortunately, that mentor, Pappy Kenny Marizon, is no longer alive. But every day, his spirit is alive with everything we do. And I hope someday the warehouse worker who I shared all of my tips, tricks, and styles with, he'll be, a 50-year-old one day talking to a young buck or, a young doe.
So the CEOs that are listening, right? They're saying, okay, yeah, I get you. So I give, and the employees just want. And every time I turn around, somebody wants a raise, somebody wants this, somebody wants that. Yeah, I get you, Ryan. That's such bullshit. People just want what's in it for them. What do you say to that?
Well, that's a great radio station, WIFM. What's in it for me?
That's right.
So 2 points. My dad worked at a place one time, and he said if somebody, they do raises once a year. And they said if anybody went to them and wanted a raise that wasn't the time of the year, they accepted that as a letter of resignation. Now,
that's a good lesson. Dink.
Well, there you go. I mean, don't forget, I'm also a cutthroat athlete. I played D1 Aussie rules football and rugby. Like, I know how to like smash heads if we need to. But more importantly, going back to the spirit of the business, 6-time president Ron Harold in San Diego. Now, you had mentioned that I was president for 7 years. I'm only president this year, but I've been on boards and serving for 7 years.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
What he basically did was to share how important, the giving back was. That's why he's been in EO Entrepreneurs Organization as I think the 22nd member the whole time. So I had a really difficult time, and I sought out mentorship with my business. And I went to Ron. I said, Ron, you've been in the chapter. You're one of the longest serving EO members in the entire planet. There's 14,000 members. He was like number 22 or something.
That's crazy.
Right. And San Diego's the 6th largest chapter in the world, I believe, a mega chapter, which, I've had to lead during a pandemic. And anyways, just putting
that on the side.
Hey, by the way, there was a contentious, there was presidency in there too. But what he said is people want raises, right? And that's okay. But what I want you to do is take out a pen and paper, and you're going to say, if this is the top line revenue at this contribution, at this labor efficiency rate, and if we hit all of these metrics, you get X, Y, and Z. If we don't, we won't hit these things, and some of you will lose your job. And so while the time it took to eat a single breakfast burrito, because Grayson LaFrenz was there, he's CEO of Power Digital, also in San Diego, he was eating the burrito. I'm watching him chow down, listening to Ron break it down as we have this little fire going in his fireplace in La Jolla, California. I walked in with a piece of paper, I slapped it, and I said, we need to do $2 million in sales with a 15% pre-tax profitability with a labor efficiency rate of 5.3. And if you do that, everyone will get benefits. Everyone will get a raise. And I went right down the list, and it was very clear. And with that clarity, I just tracked with everybody. If you want this, you got to do this. And if you do that, there's more than enough for everyone.
Yeah.
And so again, there's some of that transparency, some of that open book accounting. Yeah, they don't need to know about your third yacht. But they certainly should know if they've, you've had a losing month and, there's going to be pay cuts. And I also said to my team, I said, I'm going to take a pay cut to help all of you because this isn't going to be easy. But when it comes back, I want you to get the reward.
I think that there's 2 things that I really want to put as lessons out there for people who are listening. 2 things. One, open book policy. A lot of people go, oh, I don't want to divulge salaries. I don't want to do this. You look at, Scandinavian countries, salaries are open, right? You always, well, I don't know, how much is Ryan making? I'm doing this. I'm that. So it creates this amount of doubt when you have an open book. And again, there's a level of detail that is okay at a certain level, right? Given the same job, you should be paid the same amount. There should be no favoritism or preference, man, women, whatever. The second thing, so that open book is critical for making everybody understand that this is transparency according to leadership. You're showing, so there is no distrust. Here's the books. Here's the books. Here's the organization. I'm not going to look in your personal finance. You're not going to look in my personal finance, but here's where we meet in the middle at this company called Company X. And here's where it is. If we're going to do profit sharing, here's what you need to do. And here's what I need to do. I think that is too many people sit on and don't let go of those P&Ls and the cash flows and are afraid to show the people. And that's not cool. And to second point, what Ryan mentioned is I often see people doing the opposite as entrepreneurs. They pay themselves less than other people and give everybody a raise. And so what are you doing? If you're giving somebody a raise, then you give yourself a raise. It's a raise across the board. It's not fair for you to be underpaid. And I mean, I'm talking about single entity entrepreneurs, right? Not you own a consortium of businesses, you've got your hold co, and then all of you got your ops co. That's different. But if you're a single entity owner and you've only got one source of income, it comes from your company. It's not fair to you, your wife, your kids, and your partner that you should pay and give an update to everybody else without treating yourself. I think that
Well,
that goes both ways.
the other thing about that too is if you don't pay yourself a fair market wage, however you structure it, then your business is not being built to sell. And
Correct.
so what a lot of people will do is just take enough expenses to get by. Maybe they're only paying themselves $30,000, $40,000, but that then alters the correct pricing strategy. It also alters the value of the company. If somebody else came in, if you got hurt and had to step out, maybe you would need to pay that person 110. That
Mm-hmm.
then affects the bottom line. And I'm a global entrepreneur organization trainer for the accelerator program. So that's early stage startups, 250 to a million. And I train all over the world talking to these CEOs about making sure you have a clear strategic plan. Because
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people just kind of go into business and they're wondering what happened, or they wondered what just happened. And then there are those that go in and make it happen, right? There's the three. There's those that make it happen, those that let it happen, and those that wonder what just happened. And you want to be the person that made it happen. And you do that by having a strong and consistent, clear plan. And in the book Double Double, it talks about the painted picture, about setting out a vision and a strategy. And when you sit with it, 90+% of what happens in a vivid vision will happen based on all of the studies. And
Mm-hmm.
so if you can sit there and articulate in writing and share with your clients and share with your employees and share with your friends where you're headed, what you're intending to do, then that sets rockets of desire for things to metaphysically happen in the behind the scenes to allow that kind of growth to occur. And
Agree.
that's really what CEOs need to be thinking about. Where do you want to go? Do you just want a cash generating system that doesn't necessitate your presence? Do you want to be, swashbuckling CEO and involved in every single big sale? You can do whatever you want because you have the power as the co-creator to determine, do you want 3 cabins or do you want one high-rise apartment?
Mm-hmm.
And what happens though is you need to take the time and hurry up and write down that goal, because then you'll be more likely to get there. Write it down.
The when I take a company through, the first thing that I always say is I've changed the vision mission statement around to saying, okay, what is the just cause of the company? And I believe that that's very similar to spirit. So
Mm-hmm.
what is your just cause? The purpose is easy. So, a positive adventure, you provide services to businesses for retreats and training, and that's the purpose of it. But what is the true just cause? What do you want to deliver? How do you want to impact humanity? And that is a lot of people struggle. They go, why do you want to need a just cause? Because you need to create a circle of safety for people to trust in your ability to lead. And a lot of CEOs are not good leaders, let's face it.
Mm-hmm.
And the ability to pay yourself a right amount so you can get the fuck out of the way, pardon my language. That if you can't lead people, and you don't have to be an extrovert to be a leader. I know a lot of good introverted leaders. You better know your shit, how to lead people or get out of the way. And that's
Well, sometimes getting out of the way is the best form of leadership. And in my
exactly.
situation, predominantly a lot of my clients and a lot of my industry is women led. And I thought it would make more sense, given a lot of the people at my business are women, that I should have a female CEO. And so Melissa J. Cox Lopez, it was voted most admired CEO in the San Diego chapter in 2016. She had a big exit. She lived down the street. Her birthday was the same birthday as my brother. Her son is the same birthday as my daughter. It seemed like it was a good
Da
cause.
da da da.
The tea leaves said that this would be a good human being. We get along great. My brother was my best friend. Rest in peace. And I replaced myself. I had carried the business as far as I could, and I have 2 small children, and I'm a single dad, and I knew that it would be better for the organization and the people involved if I focused on doing pickups and drop-offs and being there for my children than just grinding out another sale. And she has a strong background in marketing and just is well liked and admired, and I'm tired and beat up from the street up, and I'm from the Northeast. That's a different vibe than in Southern California. So I just thought it would be a good idea to step aside, and we rebranded part of our business to Onyx Teams, which is it really born from the need of this pandemic that we need to bring people back out, and people aren't rushing to go indoors again. And so we do a lot of our retreats in retreat centers, out of yurts, campsites. We had Atlantic Records out in Joshua Tree. Those people, they're looking for something new and different. How many times can you go to the Marriott and pay $10 muffins and do another round of golf? The new economy needs something more. So if you're thinking, first off, and I teach this with all the CEOs I work with, it's important that you have a mid-year retreat, a mini retreat of some sort, and then an annual retreat sometimes in the fall. When I was young in business, I would do like my annual planning in February, 2 months already into the quarter. And then I'm like, well, I'll do it in January this year. And then I learned, really it should be sometime around November or early December, because you want to hit the deck running. Mm-hmm. And you also want to document your meetings. You want to have your exec team meetings on the calendar a whole year out, because then it's going to make it a lot easier, because the first Tuesday of every month is the executive retreat, executive meeting, or the second Wednesday of every month is going to be your finance to review or your quarterly. And when you set out that strategy of meetings, your business starts to run almost on its own. We know there's a quarterly dinner. We know there's a monthly review. We know that there's a mid-year retreat and annual strategy. And in the annual strategy, you got to come up with that single sentence: a $15 million business with 15% pre-tax profitability, with a contribution margin of 71%. And then you work your whole business based off those metrics, and it takes so much of the guessing out. It's all about levers and knobs.
The ability to be predictable in the business that is my greatest strengths with some of the companies that I help manage, is to say, okay, well, are you reactive or proactive? And if you're constantly reactive, then you're just spinning your wheels. That's all you are. People ask me all the time, well, how come you're so calm? How come you can run 7 businesses at a time? I said, because I'm predictable. I'm predictable in the way that I plan my stuff. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by that is I know what I'm doing 9 months in advance.
Right. Now, and a typical entrepreneur chases shiny objects.
Oh my goodness.
Client that comes in, anybody that's got a heartbeat and a wallet, they're like, we can make it work. But one of the great takeaways that I've learned is the concept of having quotas. And the quota is, let's say you sell 3 different kinds of widgets. Well, you only need to sell 200,000 of these widgets, 100,000 of these widgets, and 50,000 of these widgets. Because if you break out of any one of those quotas, now all of a sudden you need a lot more staff, a lot more investment, a lot whatever. And so you get that predictability by saying, this is all we need to hit. Because if not, we need mid-level management. We need to have a whole new thing in place. And businesses go out of business having too many clients.
Absolutely. The ability to scale up, and I measure everything. People always go, why are you asking so many stupid questions? They don't say stupid, but because so they say, well, why do we need to measure this? Why do we need to measure that? Because I said, when you know what to measure everything, when you are building a home, do you measure the space between the fence and your foundation? Do you measure the distance between? You need to triangulate everything. To have a good direction, you need to know where you are and where you come from. So you can't do a 2-dimensional strategic direction. You cannot. You need to go.
There's a great saying: if it can't be measured, it can't be changed.
Correct.
And if you're not measuring, like I always use the scale as the reference. Some people, which God bless them, they're not me. They're always trying to gain weight. I'm trying to put 20 pounds onto the gym. I'm 6'1", 210 pounds. I'm not always trying to gain weight, right? I'm trying to maybe make my mile faster. But I use the scale as a reference. How do you know if you're losing or gaining weight unless you get on the scale?
Exactly.
If you get on the scale once a week, you'll now have a baseline. But if you add in 3 workouts a week or 50 extra pounds on the bench, if you can track how much you're benching and you can track how much you weigh on the scale, you're going to see that certain behaviors are going to make it go up and go down. And the same thing with business. One of my first mentors said, businesses aren't about the product or your service. They're not about your team. They're not about your core values. They're not about anything beyond levers and knobs. And what that means is Do you crank up the administration a little bit? Do you turn down the overhead a little bit? Do you pull that knob of the expansion? Do you move that back up and cut part of your workforce because you've gone into areas that you have no idea how you even ended up in that realm? And that's basically what it comes down to, is that you almost have to be like a scientist working in the lab with your business to really understand that predictability.
You know what? The scientists in the lab, because I always say that there's always correlation and connectivity. Mm-hmm. So if you pull on one thing, something else will move. So people see things in silos. Oh, sales is not going well. Okay, so why are sales not going? Or marketing, we're not getting the traction that we want. Well, what's the product? So business is simple. Think of a great idea, sell the great idea, make the great idea, get paid for the great idea, right? People overestimate business. They don't understand, or they don't realize that, when you calculate that if I add 10 to this, well, I need to add 2 to this. There's always a correlation. And the greatest baseline is time. Everybody's got the same time. You've got 24 hours, unless you have a magical wand that, or a magical potion that can make 25 or 26. I'd love to know how to do that. But, everybody's got the same time baseline, which is time. So X over Y over time. So if I change X, will it change Y over that same period of time? So velocity is the best thing to do. And I love that analogy of chemistry. If every kid who watches TikTok knows that if you put a Mentos now in a bottle of Coke, whoosh, right? So what happens if you put 2? What happens if you put 3? What happens if there's this kid that put an aquarium full and put a whole bunch of Mentos and didn't really do anything? So the experiment is key. I love that analogy. I think it's really good. I've
got another component there for you amazing listeners out there. Don't forget to drink your water. This is an hour-long conversation. Stay hydrated out there. On my team used to work so hard, I had to force water breaks because people were just working so hard. And you got to have some water. You got to have some get up from your work. But at the end of the day, a business is a series of systems run by a series of people.
Correct.
And what I learned is, so initially I wanted to study forestry because I grew up in the woods. I realized I'd be alone, and that was no fun. So then I studied social work, but then I realized I'd be in underfunded agencies in the city where I ended up. And so I said, well, I want to do outdoor experiential education and facilitation, which was taking the people outdoors and connecting the two. And what I learned was, and you hear this throughout all of history, when the seashells on the trading route meet the obsidian, that's when the magic happens. Mm-hmm. When Elon Musk looks at rockets, he's not looking at rockets, he's looking at the propulsion, or batteries and solar. You're marrying industries together. And what I discovered when I traveled all around the world was the world is run by people. Mm-hmm. And one of the common themes in almost all of humanity is conflict happens, and confusion can occur. And we all have to interact, whether you're going on the subway or unless you're in a hermitage and you're meditating and you're interacting with the Great Spirit. And most of the time, you still got to pull out the rice bowl and go to the kitchen and do your meditations with all your other monks. But that's why I started Positive Adventures, and how we go back to this idea of the spirit of business is because that business, which is a series of systems, are run by a series of people. Now, granted, AI is occurring, but ultimately, if you don't look after your people, and if you don't take care of them, they won't take care of you. Mm-hmm. And in a broader sense, if you don't look out for your community, then your community won't be there for you. Agreed. And you look at the Amish and their barn raising, or you look at in New England when people are stuck in the snow, complete strangers that they'd never seen before. Even Yankees fans will help out a Red Sox fan. They will pull out and say, "Can I help push you out?" Because that's the spirit of what brings all of us to the point out of pack caves into this place where we can be on the moon and be landing on Mars. And there's something there. And there's something that's not always talked about in business books. And it's really about empowering and engaging everyone around you as the priority, not just the metrics and chewing people and spitting them out.
Correct.
And through education, through storytelling, your employees can do so much more, but you have to provide them the resources and the opportunities for that self-discovery or professional development. You can't just assume they should know everything and be static, because mm-hmm. people leave because they don't enjoy their managers or they don't see an opportunity for growth. Correct. And millennials and below, they're leaving 3 years or less. So mm-hmm. you can't get that kind of longevity, which means you're turning into a mill. So what you have to do is remember that happiness, long pause for effect, happiness is where purpose and pleasure intersect.
Da, da, da,
Yeah, you
da.
have to have something that is not only pleasurable, but purposeful. And I had both on both extremes. I traveled all over, I did all sorts of stuff, but I wasn't really giving back. I was just absorbing. I lived in a group home in Boston. I taught kids that were wards of the state. I was a school teacher in the inner city. But at the end of the day, like, where was my lobster dinner, man? I love lobster. But at the end of the day, combining those forces is where I truly feel at peace and at ease. And you have to ask yourself, my fellow listener friend, are you at ease? Are you living a stressed life? Do you wish it looked different? Do you wish that you had some other way of expressing yourself beyond what you're doing? I had a great friend. He was a chemical engineer. He hated it in college. I said, well, Brian, why are you doing it? My counselor told me it doesn't look good. Your major. So I talked to him 20 years later. Hates his job. He's a chemical engineer. Hates it. Always has hated it. Asked him what he'd rather do. He said, I always wanted to be a history teacher. Like, for 20 years, bro, you've been doing something you hated. You have the power, autonomy, and authority to make the change. And maybe some business owners out there are going, I just want to go be a painter. Set up your business so you can go be a painter. Or if you really want to be a history teacher, you don't have to run your business anymore.
Yeah.
I give you permission.
Oh,
Spirits give you permission. You have been blessed to go off and follow your dreams. You want to go to Burning Man for the rest of your life? Get enough sunscreen and go, brother.
Get enough sunscreen. Oh, that's a good one. You know what? The one thing that I always tell, Simon Sinek does such a great job as a forward thinker about creating that circle of safety through his books and his speaking, and how humans are at the base of measuring both behaviors and systems, right? So when I talk about systemizing a business, it's not just about machines and software. It's about having the right behavior. If I give you a chainsaw and don't educate on how to use a chainsaw, there's more chances that you're going to get hurt than get the job done. So, and then if I give you a spoon or a little hatchet, then you're going to get demoralized, right? So the purpose and your happiness is really key. The power of morale, and people underestimate that by creating a circle of safety. If morale is the desire of a person to achieve a goal, or a person or a group of people to achieve a certain goal, and if morale is not good, some people call it company culture. I think that culture is completely different than morale. And if people come to work enthused and wanting to help, like you said, push you through the snow. Hey, Ryan's having a hard time with his marketing strategy. Okay, so you know what? I'm just gonna say, hey, Ryan, how can I help? Mm-hmm. Right? How can I help? I'm not a marketing specialist, but hey, is there any way that I can help? And that oxytocin, so we can get into actually biology, the 4 key chemicals like oxytocin that we're talking about, the love chemical, the hug chemical, the chemical
serotonin, dopamine.
That's right. And so oxytocin is built by, I played rugby for 30 years. So you can go to any other rugby club in the world and they'll accept you as their own. I was in the Army for 10 years. I can talk to somebody who else was in the service and they understand. I speak the same lingo and understand because we built that oxytocin within those groups. Mm-hmm. Nowadays, and through the pandemic, I think is important as well. How do you rebuild that oxytocin? How do you rebuild that work hard, play hard together? That creates that community within the organization where morale is elbow to elbow, shoulder to shoulder, we shall march on. Right. And that is difficult. That is not an easy thing to do through the pandemic either.
Yeah, let me drop a couple truth bombs on that. System,
Boom.
SYSTEM, system saves you stress, time, energy, and money. SYSTEM.
Can I copyright that? Can you? Yeah, can I use it?
Saves you stress, time, energy, and money. Now, how you work with morale. Now, I like to look at ancient thinkers. There was business consultants back in ancient India 7,000 years ago. They talked about how the fish was too hard to grab a hold of. The deer was always bouncing around too often. The eagle was always looking down on everybody. There's those writings out there. So Sun Tzu, author of The Art of War, there's two stories that talk about morale that stood out when I read that book when I was 13. The first was there was a group who was completely and entirely outnumbered. And so what the general did is he said, they're out there desecrating all of your family's cemeteries. They're destroying your ancestors' resting place. Now, this is war, mind you. So that invoked and ignited something in the outnumbered bunch that won out there and freaking went nuts, right? They were like, BS, we're going to go out there and school these fools. And then they did. Secondarily, in relating to morale, in relating to competition, there was another time where another army was intensely outnumbered. And what they did is the scouts said, hey, look, we're so incredibly outnumbered. And so what the general said is he said, have every third person build their own fire. Back then, you would look on the hill and you would see the size of the army by the size of the fires.
Correct.
Because, you could only have 5 or 6, 8 people around a fire. But what they did is they made hundreds of additional fires, which then made it appear that they were much bigger, which created fear in the competition. So, and similarly, you hear about the burning of the boats. The army lands. As soon as they land, they burn the boats and they say, all right, boys, well, we got to have to go finish business. There's no ride home, So it's forcing you to do better. Now, my next point is I've been working with groups and teams in businesses all across the world for 20 plus years, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, been on stage with thousands. And this is the one thing that I've learned more often than anything else. When you create opportunities for moments of service, it releases the chemicals that make them want to keep doing it. Now, It could be something as simple as an appreciation award. You appreciate somebody, but they can only have that award for a week. But the only rule is when they give it to somebody else, they have to share with the team why that award is on, Joan's desk. And so Joan gets that award. And then, a week goes by or 3 days goes by. And then she puts it on Elijah's desk and shares with the team. Elijah was there for me. My car needed a jump. That's just such a great spirit of being a decent human being. Now Elijah's got it. What happens? Everybody at the office goes, man, I want the award.
Yeah.
How can I get, woo, I brought in donuts for everybody. I got super days. What do you need? And so that really creates the spirit. Or it could be something as a monthly cleanup.
Yeah.
There's a grind at the office. The proposals are coming in. Nobody's saying people don't work really hard and grind out and have to stay late. But people are be more apt to do that if they're actually going down and giving blood or feeding puppies or doing a beach cleanup. And there's someone right now going, bleeding heart, liberal, son of a gun, I'm just gonna make money. That's fine too. That's your spirit. But we learned through all those tales that, Ebenezer Scrooge, he got schooled. There are people and stories and tales that teach us that greed alone is not enough to fulfill you. And when you die, you don't get to carry anything back. But, we've got Aristotle and Socrates and Plato in my bookshelf because they were great thinkers and they gave us a gift, so that's the spirit that keeps it going. And when your team is motivated and they are empowered, they are unstoppable.
My grandfather, with this thick brogue accent, Highland accent, would say all the time, hey, don't you ever chase about money, because you'll never find it. Work hard, money will find you.
Yep.
And that is, in a saying, just given the proper ethic, right? So if you're chasing money, and I did for a little bit, I went through the ranks and I was chasing money. And when I hit the top, I was like, hey, what do I do now?
Yeah, it's not always that cool. Some of the lamest times is when I had some of the easiest goes. But I'll share a real quick story that my dad taught me. My dad told me he was building a bridge to go to this house. And basically, he saw the gentleman that lived there and he said, hey, he was like 15 or something working on this thing, cleaning off the logs. And he said, how did you get this house? He said, it's real simple, boy. It only took me a turkey and a ham. He said, well, what do you mean? And he said, every Thanksgiving, I bought every person on my team a turkey. And every Christmas, I gave time off and I always gave everybody a ham. And it showed that the worker, that I cared about them, that I was interested in them, and they cared back and cared for me. And when my dad told me that back when I was maybe 30 years old, I bought a turkey for every one of my employees. I don't even eat meat half the time. And I'm buying a turkey for every single employee that I've ever had. And I still have one employee who hasn't worked for me for 8 years, Katie. She still sends me a receipt and I still pay for her family turkey. I'm like, wow, 8 years. She just keeps doing it. I just keep sending it. But you know what? She built my company. She made me who I was. Now, to multiply that, 1 year, I said, okay, everybody, Thanksgiving's coming up. Just send in your receipts for the turkey. And Abby walks up to me and she says, boss, we've made a decision where none of us are actually going to get a turkey. And I said, oh, why not? Is this like, plant over process? Are we going Whole Foods now? Or should I get a tofurkey? Want me to send you some heads of lettuce? Where do you want to be with this? And she said, no, because my husband is deployed in Iraq, we're going to send all of the turkeys that each of us would have got. And they're going to go to the servicemen and women that are stationed in Iraq. Goosebumps. Years ago, I still get goosebumps telling that story.
Dude.
Because I provided an opportunity of giving back. They showed an opportunity of giving back more. And it freaking warms my soul, man. That is worth more to me than having some fancy watch. The highlights of my career were not the contracts that I closed, but when I worked with a group of children that had HIV and AIDS, and at first I was nervous and hesitant. 3 minutes off the bus, I was right in the mix. We were having a great time. They circled me up. They had me stand, and this was on the 4th of July. They didn't have any money, and I had to ask my staff to volunteer their 4th of July, which is an American holiday. And basically, they sang us a thank you song. And we as staff wept. We cried, holding each other. That is the spirit of business. Because I could have been at the beach partying. I could have been buying fireworks and having a barbecue with my friends, but we gave up that opportunity and we provided something else for somebody else. And that's why I do what I do and teach other people to do it. Because if a numbskull, harebrained New Englander who's stoic, who has no feelings or emotions, who runs into brick walls and gets up and says, let's do it again, can feel, then imagine the people who are truly empathetic and deeply connected that do that and are awakened to it. My whole life, feelings had been conditioned out of us because New England is harsh. Mm-hmm. It's a harsh location. It's -20 all the time. It's freezing cold. You have to be rugged. But there's so many acts of giving back then that I wasn't aware of them. And now I'm able to teach them and it makes a difference. Thank you for listening. I'll be here all day.
Thank you. I think the ultimate kind of wraparound of all of this, after listening to you, the spirit of business, and the equation, because that's what I do, right? I equate everything. How do I get this? How do I do this every day? How do I translate that vision into frontline operations, and where happiness meets purpose? That's new for me, and it's an educational moment for me, because it is true. The spirit of business is, how do you, as the leader, have happiness and purpose, and show and disseminate that same behavior to everybody else?
That's right. And happiness is where purpose and pleasure intersect, because you can do purposeful things and become hollow, and you can do pleasurable things and become hollow. But when you learn to do pleasurable things that have purpose, and you can apply that to anything. I mean, you might be working a factory job where all you do is pull down a handle every day. But if you actually volunteer at the the local old folks home because you get off of work at 2 and you spend,
or just coach the baseball team,
Yeah, like any one of those components, you can say, I'm happy that I have this job, which provides me this opportunity to volunteer and have this time. It doesn't always have to be all in the exact same moment.
Yeah.
But the more we give, the more we get. They got the book, The Go Giver, on that. And, it can be counterintuitive. It really can be. When I was first starting my business, I gave away all of my products and services in certificates to nonprofits, then sold it at their auctions and their dinners. And so somebody else was paying the nonprofit for it, but then a client was calling me up. So my cost per client acquisition was actually them paying me because I was giving all of them away. And so I was ending up on newsletters, and my whole couple first years of business, anytime a charity asked me for anything, I always gave my product and service away because I would give them a $2,000 leadership training for their staff. They'd sell it to a biotech for $1,000. The biotech would call me, but it was only good for 20. They'd have 28. I'd add the markup for the 8. Then they become longtime clients, and they were perpetuating because of all of this giving and giving back. So you don't always have to dump millions of dollars into your media campaigns. Earned media is real. You know, when you do something and the papers write up about it, it has more meaning and value to it than I just paid a cost per click to get, this cold lead to come in. Whereas, when you're volunteering on nonprofit boards, you're usually around titans of industry who have enough money that they don't actually have to work. And that's why they're volunteering to probably leave some legacy. And that's where you can really make a lot of great business contacts. Because you're both there giving back. And don't get me wrong, my company does millions of dollars in business. My house is on the ocean, but I'm still giving back.
People forget that being kind doesn't mean being poor. You don't have to be a monk. You don't have to give up everything. It's the opposite. The more you give, the more you get. Yep. And I always look for opportunities. We're doing renovations in my house, and these two guys came in and they picked up my dishwasher and dryers and stuff like that, and came in right polite, good young men, working hard, sweating, truck full of appliances, loaded it up. And they said, "Oh, you'll get a survey from us. Would you be so kind?" I said, "Absolutely." So they're loading up, walk up, and gave them $20 each. And I'm not saying that donations is the way to give all the time. These young men, I know what it is. They worked hard. They were polite. I'm sure that the company they work for probably doesn't do that. Did I make their day? And I didn't even think about it twice, right? I had the cash, gave it to them, and it made me feel good.
Yeah, that reminds me of two great stories. So my brother Jimmy, he came home one day. He was a cook in the kitchen down by the water in a tourist part of town. And he had a $50 bill, and he flashed it in my face, and he was beaming and glowing. My brother Jimmy was always pretty ornery. He was not the coolest brother. I mean, he was a great guy, but he was always like, "Rah." And I'd never seen him so excited. And I said, "Whoa, what's that about?" And he said, "The boss came in and gave everybody a $50 bill." Woo! I mean, this is like in the 80s, man.
Oh,
like
yeah, $50 was
a $500 bill, And I remember even when I was like 7, I said to myself, I want to be that kind of boss. And I have always walked in and given my staff cash bonuses, typically in $2 bills because they're gigantic, and who doesn't love a $2 bill? And I'll dump a bag of money on someone's desk. It's a couple $100, but I'm like, you deserve it. Like, go out and head to dinner. Go get those new tires. Go get what you need to do. And so there's a great piece there. And then the other thing is I completely forgot about the second part of the story because I was just thinking, who do I need to give some cash to? Because that's it'll come to me. I'll cut you off somewhere in the middle.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah. So I'm 18 years old. Me and my brother started a painting company. I graduated high school. I drove straight across the country to paint for the summer to try to save up to make some money for college. And, you paint some people's houses and they look down on you. They don't want you in the house. They don't want you around. They give you this kind of skeptical eye the whole time. And you're like, I'm an 18-year-old kid. I'm painting your outside. Am I going to steal your chrysanthemums out of the front yard? Like, give me a break, But there was this one woman that lived in the house. And, even though we would bring sandwiches or whatever, I think she noticed that I was just eating like white bread with a little Tabasco and an egg. Nothing very fancy. We didn't have a lot of money and we were trying to make it, And she would just come out quietly and leave a couple of extra sandwiches and a couple of cold cans of soda. And she said, "I hope the boys have a good day." And we'd go back inside. We would put like extra coats of paint on there. I'm fluffing up the lawn where I was standing. I was like, telling her profusely how amazing she was because she wasn't looking at us like with a skeptical eye. She saw our humanity. And that's what my boss taught me. My first boss who taught me about the yoga and the green juice and the meditation. He said, work on it like it's your mom's house.
Yeah.
And that simple little thought was like, I mean, I don't know, some people probably have very complicated relationships with their mom, and I understand that. But work on it like it's your mom's house. It's just like my first boss when I worked at a pizza place when I was 15. He said, build the pizza like you want it. And
Yeah.
like, I love mushroom pizza, right? So I'm pouring mushrooms all over the pizza, right? And so one day I look over at this other kid, and he put like 6 mushrooms on there. And I'm like, hey, what's the deal there? There's only 6 mushrooms. He goes, I hate mushrooms. I'm like, yeah. And then I said exactly what my boss said to me, because that's the spirit of transference,
Yeah.
through storytelling. I said, well, what's your favorite pizza? And he said, pepperoni. And I said, put the mushrooms on and pretend they're pepperonis and let me see what the pizza looks like. Thing was covered in buckets of the stuff. So, that's what we need more of. More of that mentorship, leadership, guidance, support, and to do more than what we've been conditioned to do, because it's been beaten out of us to not look out for someone else. Oh, don't give that homeless man $1. He'll become a drunk. Well, what are you doing at the local, you're complaining about homeless people. Are you going to the shelter? Are you doing a clothes drive? Can you do a resume building? All you're doing is complaining about the homeless people you have to pass in your community. Have you got to know one of them? Maybe they're a mathematician that could be your outsourced fractional CFO. You just haven't given them a chance because you're judging them. You don't know.
Dude, I've got stories to tell about that. But yeah, I mean, I think Ryan, we're going to have to do a part 2 on this one, because there's just going to be
part 17, man. Let's go for this, baby. We're living the dream.
All right. 2 questions. All right. So the first one is, as we wrap things up here, leaders or learners, not necessarily readers, but you are a Renaissance reader. What is the one book, piece of information that you say was the most powerful in your career? And then the second component of that, the second part is, what are you working on now? Okay.
Okay. So it's a 2-part question, because I have some Libra as part of my astrological sign. The book that really changed my life was Paramahansa Yogananda's Autobiography of a Yogi. And it was Steve Jobs' only book that he ever had on an iPad. It was the book that the Beatles, really related to as their level of success. And it's also the book that my first mentor, who taught me about yoga and green juice and meditation, guided me towards. And he said that it was a bit of a framework to understand your place. And it was the science of religion. If you didn't buy into religion or you lost your religion, this was more so about the physiological response of the experience that you can have. And we touched on some of the biohacking, the dopamine, things like that. But secondarily, the backside to that is the practical side. And that's Simple Numbers, Straight Talk, Big Profits by Greg Crabtree. Greg Crabtree writes in a very folksy, farmy style and makes finance and the books easily digestible. He uses valleys of the death and how the Patriots did their winning, and it makes it very simple. And I would say for the business owner out there, there's many of us who don't truly have a firm comprehension of the way the books really work. We pay somebody to deal with the books, but Simple Numbers, Straight Talk, Big Profit was really a welcoming home party to my level of professionalism as a CEO, because it really helped organize it on that tangible sense, because I spent so much time out there on the visionary metaphysical sense. And what am I doing next? Besides picking up my daughter on her first day of in-person school, which is pretty awesome. I think we're going to get a little frozen yogurt, maybe stop by Bed Bath & Beyond if there's enough time. So I rebranded my corporate division into Onyx Teams, and we're focusing a lot more on the outdoor experiential components for businesses. I really want to see more people engaging in the nature setting, because that in itself, the Japanese talk about forest bathing, where just being out of doors or being near trees can do something for you physiologically. And I'm really trying to heal myself and humanity. And I feel that it is my calling and my birthright. My mother was a healer, as a nurse for all of those years. I want to see more businesses treat their employees in a holistic way to empower them and engage them to focus on their own dreams and to help them reach that, so that we can see a broader, deeper, loving, more understanding community. There is so much shenanigans out there. We got people chanting on both sides of the streets, throwing rocks at each other, and they're both American citizens, you know?
I
So
know
we
it's
need to take a step back. We need to bring love back into the equation. We need to talk about love in a productive sense. And we need to stop all the division. And that's what I'm doing every day.
there needs to be a lot more healing of the humans, healing of the planet. There just needs to be a lot more healing across the world. So
Yeah, make love popular again. That's my new slogan. Going on a bumper
dude,
sticker.
when did a handshake and a hug, become, something of sexual connotation or discrimination? Is just beyond me. So anyways, with that being said, Ryan, thank you very much for introducing the spirit of business as the title of our show. It's I think people are going to say, what, that's it? You guys have just been talking for an hour and 15, 20 minutes now? Keep going. Okay. So if Ryan's good for it, maybe we'll do a part 2 on that one. So with that being said, thank you very much, Ryan, for being on the show. Appreciate it.
Yeah, happy to be here. It has been a high pleasure and distinct honor to share your time with me. And if anybody out there wants to connect with me, Ryan at positiveadventures.com, adventures with an S. Feel free to reach out. If you shoot me an email, I'll send you a note. Let's just have a chat. We'll have a call. We'll go for a walk. We'll spin a yarn. We'll have some good times, whatever it needs to be. I'm a friend of many and a lover to all. And I can't wait for round 2. I don't even think I'll be able to sleep. I'm so excited, Brother Bear.
With that said, thank you very much, Ryan. My name is Martin Hunter. I am the host of What CEOs Talk About, where we translate strategy into front. I always forget. My marketing team is going to kill me. I can't even remember what I have to say. Please subscribe. Yeah. Click on this, click on that. Crap. You guys know what to do. I don't need to tell you. All right. Thank you very much, everybody, for listening and or watching. And then we'll see you on the next episode. Thank you very much, Ryan.
Toodaloo, friends.
Thanks for tuning in to What CEOs Talk About. Make sure to click subscribe to get notified about future episodes, or check us out at www.whatceostalkabout.com.